J10C.
Welcome to GVS Deep Dive, this is Najma Minhas. In a dramatic turn of events, China's J10C may have done what many thought was unlikely. It neutralized the French-built Rafales. Many have now called this a deep-seek moment, where China's fighter jets and military equipment are as good as Western military jets at a fraction of the price. Is China now outpacing the Western military hardware? This wasn't just a dogfight. It could signal the global reordering of military tech dominance. It's a historical shift for Chinese defense equipment. Once again, the Chinese model works through its public-private companies to deliver results that are cheaply and efficiently ready to take over the world markets in one more field, it seems. There was a massive rise in the Chinese defense stocks after India launched Operation Sindoor, a military attack in Pakistan, which saw the two countries in a dogfight in the air. India had 72 fighters and Pakistan had 42 fighters, according to the Pakistan Air Force, which gave a briefing saying that it knocked out 5 planes in total. 2 Indian Rafales using the Chinese-made J10Cs, which were armed with the PL-15 missiles. 1 Rafale was knocked out by the air defense system, and the other 2 were taken down were the Russian MiG-29 and the Su-30s. This cost over $1 billion, lost overnight by the Indians. Now, the PAF also claimed that they could have taken down even more, but that they restrained to do so. The J10C's manufacturer, Chengdu Aircraft Corporation, saw its stock surging by as much as 40% over the 2 sessions alone. And when defense victories start to move markets, it's no longer just about the battlefield wins. It's about industrial and geopolitical capital for the country as well. Pakistan took delivery of the J10CE, the export version as it's called, in 2022. Our jet fighters shot down 3 Indian Rafales, 3 Rafales that are French, according to Ishaq Dar, Pakistan's foreign minister, who told his parliament last Wednesday. Ours were the J10C. Now, this is the J10C's first known air-to-air kill recorded in live combat, and it is being seriously considered by military experts across the world to see how far Chinese weapons have reached, in particular to assess the performance of China's PL-15 missile, the air-to-air missile, against the Meteor, which is a radar-guided air-to-air missile produced by the European group's MBDA, which is a consolidation of 3 or 4 European companies, which includes the Brits and the French as well. India itself has not confirmed the downing of any aeroplane so far. However, unidentified high-ranking French intelligence officials have told media that Pakistan has downed an Indian Rafale fighter, and some American sources are confirming the same as well. Now, until now, Chinese weaponry has not been field tested against any Western-made systems like the Rafale. The Indian Air Force operates a fleet of Rafale F-3Rs, as they're known, which are some of the most advanced models of this aircraft. By comparison, the J10C is a 4.5 generation fighter, which is almost at the level of 5th generation systems like the US-made F-35, but it's not the most sophisticated of the Chinese fighter jets. They have much better performance ones, including the J-20 and the J-35s, and not to mention the up-and-coming 6th generation aircrafts that they are due to launch. The J10C was carrying the Chinese-made PL-15 missile. Now, this missile's never been used in combat before, and it does have the ability to fire targets which are way beyond the visual range of a pilot. Now, China's development of the PL-15 missile, specifically designed to outrange it, the AIM-260 Joint Advanced Tactical Missile, as it's called. Now, the Americans will be very carefully looking at any footage or physical footage if the Indians give them access, as they expect to face something very similar if they ever go to war with China over Taiwan. The PL-15E missile, once again, the export version, can travel up to about 145 kilometers. It's less than the domestic equivalent version, which can travel around 300 kilometers. Although there are reports that Pakistan potentially had the domestic model, but these have not been confirmed. The PL-15 missile has several advantages. Once it's been fired, it has a large rocket booster that briefly propels that projectile above Mach 5 or hypersonic speeds. In the middle of its flight, it then guides to the target by an actively electronic scanned array that's known as the AESA radar that can be held on the launch system itself or on a separate vehicle. It is being speculated that Pakistan may have had the lower range export version, in which case it may have had a separate vehicle which initially locked on the coordinates on the Rafales, for example, and then passed these on to the PL-15 missile. Now, once the missile is close to the target, it switches on its own AESA radar and it locks it on and homes in with a deadly accuracy, of course. It also has a dual pulse motor, which means that after the initial blast falls away, a second burst of speed allows it to go between 10 or so kilometers away from the target. Now, Pakistan buys the vast majority of its arms from China. Some 81% of imports between 2019 and 2023 came from China, whom it calls its iron brother. And this is according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, which is world-renowned for tracking global arms flows. New Delhi has increased arms purchases from Western allies and reduced its reliance on Russia. Since 2006, purchases from France, Israel, and the United States have surged. India's main supplier, Russia, now provides only 36%, down from 75%. France now supplies around 33% of its imports, up from 1% in 2006. Now, this is the IAF's first combat loss since Balakot in 2019, when they lost a MiG-29 Bison in an air duel with Pakistan. The Dassault Rafale is regarded as a top-tier 4.5 generation multi-role fighter, and France has aggressively marketed it across the world as one of the most versatile and combat-proven jets in the world. India, between 2016 and 2022, purchased over 36 jets for around $8.7 billion, making it one of the country's most expensive defense deals. Now, France marketed the Rafale to India as a game changer, particularly after the 2019 Balakot strike, where India claimed that the Rafales would have improved its operational readiness. The Dassault itself emphasized Rafale's Meteor BVR missiles, which have the Spectra electronic warfare suite and some multi-role adaptability. The two countries have just signed last April, literally 2 weeks ago, another massive deal for $7.6 billion to buy an additional 26 Rafale marine aircrafts, which are due to be delivered in the next 3 to 6 years. Now, the deal may potentially be under threat after what just happened. In 2022, Indonesia also bought around 42 Rafales. And a couple of years earlier, in 2017, Qatar picked up around 36 Rafales. So these are big bucks for France and define the close relations between many countries, but in particular between India and France. Emmanuel Macron was the chief guest last year for India's 75th Republic Day celebrations. Over the past 2 decades, China has poured massive state investment into military research and development and transformed its defense capabilities across land, sea, air, and cyberspace. From 2000 to 2023, China's defense budget has increased over sixfold, reaching around $224 billion last year, second only to the United States. And a significant share of this spending has gone into R&D intensive sectors like stealth aircraft, hypersonics, naval systems, and unmanned platforms. According to the United States Department of Defense, the country is rapidly closing the gap in many advanced capability areas with the United States. And Beijing is aiming to achieve what is called the intelligentized warfare dominance by 2049. Now, this investment that Beijing has done has yielded a new generation of competitive hardware, including the J-20 stealth fighter, which is a direct challenge to the United States and Russian aerospace dominance. In unmanned systems, China now exports combat drones like the Wing Lung and the CH-5, which rival United States models but come at a much lower cost with much fewer political strings attached. Now, this surge in innovation is part of a Chinese broader strategy to develop a fully modernized People's Liberation Army by the middle of this century, the 21st century, and to position the Chinese military products as viable alternatives in the global arms market. So, for example, Beijing is far ahead on its development of hypersonic missiles. China's DF-17 hypersonic glide vehicle is already deployed and integrated into the PLA, and it's reportedly capable of evading United States missile defense with speeds over Mach 5 already. Russia has fielded its own avant-garde hypersonic boost glide vehicle, which it's used during its war in Ukraine. It's set to travel over 3,500 miles per hour, making it once again above that Mach 5 speed and difficult to intercept. Now, the United States, which initially started working on hypersonic weapons over 60 years ago, stopped and started during the different periods, has only recently started again due to competitive pressure of China's lead in hypersonic missiles, and it's designing a new BVR missile system, but Washington currently lags in any deployed hypersonic capabilities. So it marks that rare moment in modern military history where the United States military technology is playing catch up to its strategic rivals. So in essence, China is now setting the pace, not catching up. Crucially, China's defense procurement process is highly centralized and very fast moving. It allows it to convert R&D advances into deployable systems at a much faster speed. It's deeply connected to its civilian technology sector as well, what Beijing calls a civil-military fusion. So what it enables it to do is the integration of commercial advances in AI, semiconductors, let's say, from companies like Huawei into its military platforms. And it gives the country a rapid edge in emerging technologies. Now, the model contrasts very sharply with the much slower, more expensive, and much more politically constrained Western procurement system, whether it's France or it's the UK or it's the United States. And what's also interesting is that the Chinese model of military development, unlike their Western counterparts, Chinese arms companies only get a small percentage of their revenue from arms sales. So, for example, Norinco is China's largest arms maker. It only makes around 20% of its revenue from arms sale. At home and abroad, Norinco is involved in many other sectors which are either mixed, potentially dual-used, or simply civilian business lines. The Aviation Industry Corporation of China, AVIC, which makes most of China's military aircraft, including the J10Cs, in the news currently, makes an even smaller percentage from arms sales. Among China's top 5 arms makers, the highest share of revenue derived from arms sales is around 44%, and that's at the state-owned enterprise China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation. At the others, it ranges between 25 to 32%. By contrast, among the top 5 United States players, the lowest share of revenue derived from arms sales is at 44% at Boeing, with the highest share being 90% at Lockheed Martin. Now, this contrasting manner of development by arms companies is actually deliberately encouraged by Deng Xiaoping, who at the time encouraged the PLA and the defense-oriented SOEs to get into civilian commercial businesses. And it was because China was a poor country. So the purpose was twofold. It was to encourage development wherever it was possible and to supplement the PLA budget at that time when state resources were focused on economic growth. Now, this led them to be generally much more nimble, cost-effective, and responsive to markets. And it was not just dependent on getting hundreds of billions of dollars being contracted out by the governments and having no incentive to be cost-efficient or having fast turnarounds. China for decades bought hardware from Russia, But in the last several years, it's become a small net exporter. China had 5.8% of all global arms exports between 2019 and 2023, making it the fourth largest supplier of conventional weapons after the United States, France, and Russia. Roughly 40 countries purchased Chinese military equipment during this period. China's success in expanding its overseas arms sales rests on the attractiveness of its offer to developing nations. So as a result, in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, they're increasingly turning towards China for military hardware. And why? Because it's affordable, it's available, Beijing's willing to transfer the technology, and it does not have all those additional constraints which Western nations do. Now, after the recent downing of the Indian Rafale, China is likely to see a huge uptick in demand for its military hardware, and it can expect a surge in export interest from the Middle East and Africa and the ASEAN region. Uzbekistan was said to be deciding between the J10C and the Rafale as the next fighter jet it wanted. And footage also recently appeared that showed an Egyptian military officer sitting in a Chinese fighter jet during the Joint Eagles of Civilization 2025 exercise. And that's also fueled speculation that Cairo might be considering adding the J10C to its air force. Now, after its recent real-life commercial performance, the J10C might actually see lots of unexpected orders. If China's exportable jets can now outperform Western models, this has significant implications, which puts at risk Western military sales, which are significantly more expensive and come with greater strings attached. Now, this shift not only challenges the United States and the European defense dominance, but it also forces a rethinking of how military power is developed and exported into the 21st century. In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, China is already the top supplier, overtaking Russia. China's share of arms exports to South and Southeast Asia are also growing rapidly, partly thanks to the sharp drop in Russian exports since the start of its full-scale war against Ukraine. Between 2019 and 2023, 85% of Chinese arms exports went to Asian countries, and among these, 61% went to a single state, Pakistan. Now, one issue that Chinese companies have had selling their wares used to be the lack of real-life testing of their weapons, something now that the J10C no longer faces. Saudi Arabia is the only country that appears in the top 10 recipient list for both China and the various NATO allies in the last 10 years between 2013 and 2023. Now, although it spent only a fraction in China compared to the Western nations, but in the case of Saudi Arabia, it's not just doing it for the most cost-effective weapon. It's doing it for many other reasons about why it's giving out money to the Americans, for example. We know that in 2018-19, when the Trump administration was coming to an end, the Saudis were busy giving them around $350 billion just as Trump was about to leave in 2020. China's state-led and tightly coordinated model is challenging that military Western dominance at a pace that few of them anticipated. With that centralized planning, massive R&D funding, and close integration with its civilian technology industries, Beijing is proving that you don't need to follow the Western contractor model to lead in defense innovation. Now, this shift isn't just about who builds the best fighter jet. It's about who's going to define the future of warfighting, whether it's AI-powered targeting systems or unmanned combat platforms to space warfare, electromagnetic dominance. Now, as countries around the world weigh their defense partnerships, they're not just buying weapons. They're buying into a vision of how wars will be fought in the 21st century. And increasingly, that vision isn't just being shaped in Washington or Paris, but in Beijing. Thank you for giving me your time today. Please leave a comment below giving your thoughts on India-Pakistan actions taking place or on the Chinese weapon threat to the Western domination. Have a great day, and thank you once again for joining me.